Hi, everybody, and welcome to Zero Trust or Bust. Bring your own cloud to real-time data. We're going to jump right in. This is a story. To protect the innocent and to avoid any troubles with my marketing leadership, I'm using a made-up company name as a stand-in for real accounts with real challenges that we have teamed up with to help solve. Finance Company X, or FCX, has a problem. Three problems, actually. First, the team has pressure to implement a major cloud migration, moving away from cumbersome on-premises solutions and pulling in a multi-cloud strategy to their business in order to improve their agility and better meet failover capabilities. And their finance department also looks very favorably on cloud solutions in order to reduce CapEx and OpEx pressure. They're just getting started figuring out how to build an omnichannel cloud, and they're trying to do that while they ensure that they're doing the best they can to provide resilience to their business as a whole, meaning they want to expand to multiple data centers, but they're also deeply considering the additional complexity that that new architecture is going to bring. So FCX is fundamentally trying to figure out how to integrate the entire business, in addition to figuring out how to simplify and get a single pane of glass, particularly getting that view into their data, so that everyone at the company has better visibility and a centralized location of information and data that they can take action from. At the same time, as a major player in the financial services industry, they have big concerns about how to best protect both their business elements and their customers from particularly fraudulent activity, for which they're going to need an astonishing amount of very fast, very fresh data in order to be able to identify and figure out what is fraud and what is not. And if that wasn't enough for the team to take on, the final concern? Senior leadership has publicly stated that, quote, Finance Company X aspires to build the future on trustless systems. They've shared internally that in order to maintain their competitive edge in the finance industry, they want the business to follow the most modern and strict security principles available. So, how do they go about accomplishing all three of these goals? Migrate architectures, provide exceptional fraud detection, and then also meet their C-level stakeholders' very public promises regarding security as a whole. Everyone, thank you for joining Zero Trust or Bust. Bring your own cloud to real-time data. My name is Karen Landers, and I'm a senior project marketing manager at Ververica, the original creators of ApacheFlink. Now, Flink is the de facto open source stream data processing solution. So when we're talking about taking real-time data and being able to use that data to make decisions, that's where we shine. And FCX reached out to us regarding our Bring Your Own Cloud deployment because we can help address their modern architecture and solve these seemingly very different business challenges that they have. And why Ververica? We have the capabilities to meet their fundamental use case. At the core of all of it, they need to be able to process high frequency, high throughput, low latency, exactly once transactional processing, and they need to do that in a deployment method that matches and supports their other business challenges. They really need tight security, but they're also trying to break away from the assumption that in order to have strict security solutions, the solution has to be entirely on premises because they want the ease of a real-time data streaming solution that they don't have to constantly babysit or handle the infrastructure. And Ververica, regardless of the use case, offers a BYOC deployment that provides the infrastructure and a unified streaming data platform that allows to solve for all of this. So today we're going to chat through the importance of real-time data streaming. We're going to talk about deploying efficient, flexible, and secure data streaming solutions. We'll dive into how to integrate zero trust principles into real-time data streaming. And throughout, we're going to relate it all back to how Ververica and Finance Company X accomplished this together. Simply put, most of us here are already familiar. Real-time data processing is collecting, processing, and analyzing data as it's created so that we can make decisions and take action with that data at the very same time that it's being generated or published. And it doesn't matter how you make that decision, whether that's by code, by person, or by AI. It really only matters how fast you can turn your data into action, because as we all know, data gets stale quickly and the value of data also diminishes quickly over time. We all use and rely on real-time data constantly, and it's because it solves a litany of really cool use cases. Think of fraud detection and prevention, like what FCX is trying to accomplish, or being able to offer personalized recommendations to your customers, being able to create dynamic pricing systems that follow the market, or supercharging your security information and event management applications, building AI models that can learn, adapt, and act in real time. There's a ton of stuff that real-time data can do. And quite frankly, my teenager's very favorite use case is ordering food delivery every day that I'm traveling for work. These are just a sample of the use cases that benefit from having instant, actionable data available. And having access to data in real time allows us to make smarter, faster, and more informed business decisions. It prevents loss, it drives business growth. It also reduces operational costs for a business, unless, of course, your primary business is being the parent of a very hungry teenager. But real-time data streaming requires a couple of elements to be successful. It needs a constant, continuous flow of data from any source. It also benefits from contextual enrichment from historical data and pulling knowledge into the mix from wherever you've stored that data in the past, whether that's a data lake, a warehouse, a storage, or another application. The solution also has to be insanely scalable because honestly, data is only growing in volume. So, in order for data to be actionable, it needs to be fast, it needs to be fresh, and it needs to be protected because sensitive data is everywhere and regulatory authorities are also everywhere. FCX recognized that in order to address fraud detection, they really need real-time stream processing to do that. So let's explore how we can deploy a balanced real-time streaming solution that meets three core specific business objectives that most companies end up facing when they're trying to implement a new solution. How can they be efficient, flexible, and secure? Internally, we call this the dilemma because in any type of deployment, there's going to be some trade-off between these three major business concerns. For example, there's a general presumption with streaming data projects in particular that you have to trade off speed with cost, and vice versa. And historically, this may have been true, though we're changing that definitely. So let's take a look at common deployment methods for streaming data platforms. And yes, just a heads up, Ververica offers each of these solutions. Absolutely. So first up, our self-managed on-premises solution. This option is great for teams with highly sensitive data that can't expose their environments to outside vendors or who already have robust on-premises infrastructure and they want to be able to maintain full control and visibility of all of their data. With this option, you have full control over your infrastructure, your security, and your data compliance. You're going to benefit from enterprise-grade security because your streaming data is completely air-gapped. Your updates are shipped in a fixed cadence release, and the entire solution is completely decoupled from other self-managed instances and software. But there's a trade-off here. You're going to miss out on the pricing flexibility that's offered by cloud models. You're also going to miss out on a part of the desired single pane of glass dashboards. And you're going to be completely responsible for every single patch and delivery because all management belongs to you and all maintenance of the solution belongs to you. So a trade-off happens. You get great security, but you get potentially less efficiency and less flexibility as a whole. On the other side of the deployment spectrum is managed service, i.e. cloud-based, fully managed solution. This is a great option for teams that want to immediately get into the weeds, building, deploying, and scaling their real-time streaming apps without the complexity of having to create and manage the underlying infrastructure. So you're getting access to production-ready Flink clusters on demand, and your team can focus on business results instead of having to maintain that infrastructure. With a fully managed cloud solution, you get to focus on application logic, real-time data transformation, and your analytics, all while you're reducing your operational overhead. You're also going to get a lot of flexibility with pricing. You can use available pay-as-you-go or reserved capacity and start doing that special trade and balance with CapEx and OpEx that adds to your business efficiency and flexibility as a whole. However, with most managed solutions, you might be at risk for vendor lock-in, and you are going to be limited in choice of delivery to the cloud regions and providers that that vendor allows. In addition to this trade-off of flexibility and efficiency, your security could be significantly reduced. Because your data no longer resides within your protected kingdom, you're also going to lose some data governance because you're now relying on a third party and their security processes. Also, observability is in the hand of your vendor, which means you need to be able to trust and extend your trust to embrace that vendor also. And frankly, the threat landscape has evolved significantly with the growth of cloud solutions and deployments, and more complex as multi-cloud and hybrid cloud environments have become more common over time also. So the big takeaway here, lots of efficiency and flexibility, but potentially far less security if you're using this deployment method. So back to FCX. FCX really liked the idea of having a managed solution, but they were sensitive that while Ververica are absolutely experts at making Flink secure, that's still potentially at the sacrifice of them having full control over how their data is secured. And please tell me the last time that a regulator cared if a solution was secure if it didn't actually check one of their formal boxes. So ultimately, FCX wants to keep their security policies entirely and understandably in-house with them. So that brings us to deployment option number 3. Bring your own cloud. BYOC deployments aim to provide the best of both worlds. They sit right in between the capabilities and share the benefits of both self-managed and managed service offerings. So with BYOC, you get a compromise from the full shift left mentality of the cloud, along with not having to then also manage and maintain your physical hardware. In addition, you have absolute uptime certainty, including guarantees and service level agreements, while you get to maintain full control of your data. You fully own the real estate that your data lives in. And because your data and the solution are entirely inside your perimeter, any regulation or cybersecurity rules or data sovereignty rules are going to be respected implicitly. At the same time, you get the ease of a fully cloud-hosted solution, flexible cost profiles, and the ability to use your preferred cloud vendor and region that you want. So you can honor any existing business commitments, enterprise discounts, credits, contracts, anything you've already got going with your outside cloud vendors. So FCX saw this deployment method and realized that ultimately this creates the method that supports extracting more business value from their existing infrastructure while also allowing them to get value from a real-time data streaming projects a lot faster. So FCX gets to solve some real-time use cases like fraud detection, while not also having to manage a potentially cumbersome infrastructure, and they get to maintain absolute security. So suddenly we have a great solution for them that more ideally balances flexibility, security, and efficiency altogether. So now that we've discussed some of the common deployment methods, pros and cons, let's take a closer look at security because while flexibility and efficiency are really great to have things, security is a must-have thing. Something that our friends over at FCX are very aware of also. There's a strong trend that's been growing at least over the last 5+ years to reduce how much a company needs to extend trust out to a vendor. And Ververica's standpoint is that the goal of a BYOC deployment should be limiting our own access severely while still allowing folks full access to our robust streaming data platform. And zero trust, which we'll talk about here shortly, is as a whole becoming much less of a recommendation and much more of a must-have for businesses at the same time. Once upon a time ago, long before I had ravenous teenagers, businesses were built like a castle. All of our data and all of our important stuff lived inside a lovely, protected, known space with walls and moats and guards, otherwise known as firewalls and VPNs, potentially easy to guess, usually stagnant passwords, and occasionally two-factor authentication for the really modern among us. We'd extend trust to our vendors and then we allow them over the drawbridge via these barriers to access our data. And FCX, for some parts of their business, are still doing exactly this. They extend trusted data to vendors in order to get access to fast, scalable solutions that they need to make good business decisions. But that's not our current state of business, and it shouldn't be theirs, we hope. Now, our businesses need to be connected from everywhere into everything all the time, and that's a lot harder to protect. Connectivity today has different requirements. For one, we're all connected from anywhere Businesses, including our users, applications, and data, our third-party vendors, our business-critical infrastructure, and corporate users and partners need to be able to connect from anywhere at any time into the business. We don't have a physical Buckingham Palace to house and protect all of our data anymore. And there's a lot of factors that cause this. Remote or hybrid workers, data residing in all sorts of places and systems, different cloud migration rates that are happening, and new business use cases within a company have all advanced in public global connectivity. Or, like in the case of FCX, it might be that marketing had a shiny solution for a new CRM interface, finance got wind of that project, and now they would very much like to have access to that too. Thank you. So, what does that mean? We aren't waiting for people to walk into a physical bank branch anymore. Our ability to actually fundamentally do business today demands that we have global connectivity that's happening over public internet. And we don't only do our business on premises or in private clouds anymore. Businesses are driven by cost and often using different hyperscaler and SaaS cloud providers to connect across multi-clouds comes at a cost savings. So we may utilize multiple cloud providers due to efficiency and prevention of vendor lock-in. And also, most of us fundamentally don't want to rely on a singular instance. Our data needs to be resilient and the ability to back up without interruptions. And we also need to have fault tolerance to stuff that's just gonna happen. Earthquakes, monsoons, fires. And this mandates that multiple data centers and complexity in your cloud architecture also impacts security. So I'd like everyone to think about this. Hands up for anyone who started a cloud migration from on-prem in the last 3 years. And then keep your hands up if you've actually finished that migration. Here's the consequence. There isn't a fixed network parameter defense possible around business users, applications, or our data. We can't just close the bank doors, and we really don't want to stop allowing customers to come in during open hours because we have a problem that we need to fix. At the same time that we're loosening up where and how our business is happening, security breaches are also becoming more common. This includes insider attacks from trusted vendors or employees are becoming more commonplace also. It also includes malicious attackers that are simply getting more sophisticated as time goes by. And maldoers only have to succeed one time, while we have to protect our businesses always. It can be that if an intruder takes a single credential, they take the kingdom, i.e., all of the sensitive data. Everyone and every decision in a business needs data, and they generally say that they need that data right now. Most of us have a desire to get our business done, so we continue to extend and democratize data, but that opens up even more security challenges and potentially access to more data than any individual actually needs to be able to complete their work. So while we all used to rely on our traditional external defense parameters with a demilitarized zone that then leads into a trusted zone, that doesn't work to protect our business and our data anymore. Essentially, you can't assume that there is a trusted zone anymore. We can't assume that any space is safe for our data. Instead, we need to assume that a breach has already happened. We don't trust. We always verify. And this is the basis of zero trust principles and architectures. Now, this is simplified. Please refer to the National Institute of Technology publication 800-207 for further reference on zero trust architecture. I've put that link here. Now, zero trust architecture is a popular security framework that assumes that no user or device, whether they're inside or outside of the network, is trustworthy by default. And it requires strict verification and authorization for every access request to any data. Core principles include never trust, always verify. Least privilege access, only give people the minimum of what they need to actually successfully perform their business tasks. Assume a breach, it's best to isolate and contain threats. And then segment and contain, so that when a breach does happen, it's not as significant as it could otherwise be. To meet zero trust architecture requirements, it requires that all security policy administration and all security policy points need to stay firmly in the hands of the business. It can't be extended out to a third-party vendor. And this is uncoincidentally kind of like parenting teenagers, and it's also how FCX wants to engage with Ververica as their vendor for their streaming data platform. Also, like gremlins or teenagers, there are a few key rules that you have to follow if you're going to be meeting Zero Trust architecture framework. Who controls the vendor customer connectivity? Business has to control that. Who owns the data access and the other access policies? That policy has to stay with the business. Zero Trust implementation guidelines also require that the business has to have full observability on all levels. And also, the business is in charge of their own data storage. So now we're coming all the way back around to how do you go about building a real-time data streaming system that gives us the flexibility and efficiency of our beloved fully managed cloud solutions, but also has the security that is more in line with ironclad protection that we usually assume is only available with on-premises deployments. So let's dive into bring your own cloud and zero trust implementations. It's important to note that there's no singular de facto way to build a BYOC offering of a streaming data platform that's available out in the marketplace yet. There are plenty of ways to build a BYOC deployment where it's essentially a fully managed offering on top of a customer's cloud, but then you extend trust out to them. But that doesn't align with zero trust security guidelines. So I'm going to share Ververica's vision and version, which aligns with zero trust, because again, not all BYOC does. And this was really important for FCX, and it's also really important for any other company or industry that wants this best of both worlds and a very secure, very modern offering. So let's talk about how we build this implementation. Financial companies like FCX deal with very sensitive data every single day, whether that's account numbers, full names, credit card numbers, bank loan numbers, social security numbers. FCX is handling highly regulated data. And in addition to that, there is a lot of data moving about. And they need answers fast. For example, if you're approving a credit card transaction, because nobody wants to be standing at a grocery checkout with their cringy mom because her credit card was denied due to suspected fraud. Sorry, kiddos. So when we need answers fast, we need real-time streaming data. So here's how we can implement a streaming data platform that offers the both of all of these worlds, efficient, flexible, and secure. So when we start an implementation, particularly when it comes to building zero trust standards, it's important to kind of start with a couple of questions. So how do we provide self-service across a globally distributed data plane? That first one is actually pretty simple. The data plane itself stays with Ververica, or excuse me, wrong. The control plane stays with Ververica, while the data plane stays with FCX and their chosen cloud. And yes, they do get to choose what cloud they're using. Ververica does not see the data. I repeat, we don't see it. FCX maintains full control and all visibility into their data at all times. We literally don't even see what it looks like or know what it looks like. And when we consider who owns the metadata and where we want that to kind of live, what we're really trying to solve there is a data governance problem. In this case, Ververica, inside of our control plane, stores and controls only Ververica's metadata, while the business data never leaves the data plane that is entirely under the control and full governance of FCX. And we want to keep all data processing and data movement happening within the cloud that also belongs to FCX. We want to keep it entirely local and entirely under their control. This is all in alignment with zero trust principles. Let's dive in another layer deeper. So who controls where Ververica and FCX actually connect, right? This is happening via the agent, which is sitting inside FCX's cloud, and it's acting like a client where it's orchestrating the workplace agents. So connectivity is initiated from the agent on FCX's side. The agent maintains a secure outbound only, so egress only connection to Ververica. We're only moving one direction here. This means that FCX is in full control of both the agent and the connection. It also means that they can apply any other security and access restrictions or requirements right on top of that agent-client relationship. So who owns and controls the data access policies? That also stays all with FCX. Not only data, but the policy to access the data stays in their control. So anything you see here in gray. And if you recall, FCX has to have full observability on all levels in order to be zero trust compliant. In a couple of slides, we'll take a look at the specific details of how to give full observability access, but to start, Ververica ensures that FCX or any other customer in our BYOC deployment gets to own and control the full observability stack. Let's take a look further into zero trust principles with least privilege access, another must-have in order to meet zero trust guidelines. Here, we want Ververica to have the least access needed in order to provide a real-time solution in a zero trust deployment. So take a look at the pyramid of access versus trust. The further you start moving down this pyramid, the more trust a business would need to give out to the vendor. So the more FCX would have to trust Ververica. So how much should a vendor be controlling inside the customer stack? As far as Ververica is concerned, the less the better. Because if you start giving container as a service and pass control of your Kubernetes or infrastructure as a service, you're actually extending trust and falling out of zero trust guidelines because you can't have service level microsegmentation down on those levels. So fundamentally, the less Ververica asks for control in FCX's cloud, and the closer to the microservice, the less privileges we actually need to have. Conversely, the more controls we have in a customer stack, the more privileges are required. Thus, the more trust is required. Thus, we might be going outside of zero trust. So we want to stay all the way up here. Okay, so on the left, this is Ververica, and on the right is FCX. Ververica set up a simple deploy and manage cloud native microservices, so FCX is left with control of the rest of their stack. We've built the model that Ververica is only deploying microservices within an existing infrastructure, so microservices should fit without any elevated privileges into the existing Kubernetes environments or namespaces. Because we have no access to the infrastructure, we have no need to have access to Kubernetes. And we do make an assumption that Kubernetes is there because it's nearly always existing and running, just like it happened to be in FCX already. So the result is that Ververica doesn't need to request elevated privileges from the infrastructure or Kubernetes teams. Next up, who owns observability and the other auxiliary systems? So with observability, FCX exposes monitoring points, so we can see things like performance logging and fault tolerance. And then we pull and scrape those points. Again, this is all done in a pool. Ververica is already able to integrate any third-party observability system that's already in place in an agnostic way. That's actually an inherent capability in our unified streaming data platform already. In contrast, if we were to push the metrics, we would need elevated privileges, and that would not meet zero trust. So the whole point here is that Ververica can read the data, but we can't manipulate it. We can understand what is happening, but we're not influencing it. And if you utilize our professional services, they would also be happy to provide recommendations and best practices if you did want some additional guidance and tinkering available. So we've talked about controlling connectivity policies, data, and observability, but this is still not enough. The next thing we want to build is how we're going to ensure that there's isolation in the event that a breach does happen. And considering that the average data breach in the financial sector for one incident in 2024 costs $6.08 million each incident, not to mention the reputation of the businesses, that's something that FCX is not willing to risk. So we want to ensure that one credential can't take the entire castle anymore. Yes, we all want our businesses to be absolutely impenetrable. We do our best to build them this way, but we do need to prepare for when the worst happens. And as my colleague and friend Johnson Knoll likes to say, we want to, quote, minimize the blast radius of a breach. So we want our breaches to be isolated. And the goal is that when they do happen, their impact remains contained. The rest of the business needs to be able to continue moving instead of grinding to a halt while we seek out and remediate. More granularity and control means that a breach can then become a pop rather than a bang. We're aiming for a flesh wound, not a deadly blow. That's our entire goal here. So for FCX, they own authorization and authentication processes, so they can isolate profiles from one another. Of course, we want people to be able to log in easily to get the data that they need, and we want them to be able to do their work effectively. We also need to be able to ensure that the right people are on the business system and that they have access to the right data at the right time so that they can do their job. And Ververica also integrates into existing Active Directory, LDAP, and Kuberos. So those things can be used to inform who a person is, what it is that they do, and what they should have access to. So FCX is using their existing identity and access management solution in order to further enhance their new security. So this is a lovely loop. You use the security that you already have and that you've already invested in, and then you use that to build new modern solutions securely also. And we believe that security should be from FCX's cloud vendor or from whoever our customer vendor is, cloud vendor. Those are going to be the people and the solutions that are most likely to build the strongest and best practices for security. So we're building a system that provides isolated identity-based authentication throughout. To dive even further in, it's important to ensure that authorization is dynamic, right? We want authorization credentials to refresh dynamically so that if or when an attack or a breach happens, the attacker doesn't just get to sit inside the system indefinitely and do ever-expanding harm. We do want to kick them out, right? We want a bouncer at the door. Fundamentally, data is exceptionally valuable. FCX doesn't want anyone hanging around without tight scrutiny, and they want to ensure that granular access control is maintained at all times. Okay, so going another layer deep with regards to isolation. So with Ververica's BYOC, each of the Flink jobs can be set up as a completely isolated granular piece in a much larger business puzzle. We could have hundreds of jobs running, right? I'm showing you two as an example. So Ververica can support jobs like a fraud detection pipeline, website login authentication, reporting, high-frequency trades, all of these things. We can accommodate any configuration ad policy for real-time data streams that are already in place. And we can support them with each process running entirely independent. So when you can do this, you can also do this in like Java, Python, or SQL, which means that you can also interrogate and view the data in real time at the same time. So how do we do this? How do we ensure security breach isolation? For each of the business units, or in this case, the two example Flink jobs that are running on Ververica's platform, we have a separate agent, separate authorization, separate flow, separate authentication and processing, and then separate access policies and storage for each tenant, right? So here are our two jobs completely separated from one another. They don't share. They're not talking to one another at any point among here. And who owns authentication and authorization services? Again, in order to meet zero trust guidelines, FCX needs to own authorization and authentication. And we strongly recommend using the services that are present and native in their cloud provider already, including access policy for storage and where the data ends up being stored. Leveraging the built-in security services offered by an existing cloud platform to manage user access and permissions is recommended simply because they know that security best. And that also allows FCX to use, again, their existing working structure one more time. And how do we ensure identity-based authentication? So each tenant has its own agent and their own digital certificate and public TLS transport keys that are rotating, using role-based access control for access control on each tenant environment. So all of this means is that no one who gets inside and shouldn't be there gets to stay for a really long time and do damage. And how do we ensure dynamic authorization? Services that access storage or FCX's data need to have service level authorization with a rotation of the credentials at all times and in real time. In this case, utilizing authentication with ephemeral access tokens. This fleeting access means, again, anyone who shouldn't access the data or the systems will be removed very quickly. Again, your bouncer. So how do we ensure granular access control? At the end, data storage is entirely in the hands of FCX, but access policy should be limited to API calls used again and limiting access only to those that are truly permitted to be there. And when a breach does happen, the goal is that it occurs in a sort of vacuum. Only the isolated event needs to be explored, investigated, and remediated, while the rest of the business can keep right on moving. Hurt, not hurt. Now, Ververica purposely built our BYOC deployment using zero trust paradigm principles in every step of our original architecture, design, and implementation choices. So let's take a look at our unified streaming data platform. Our platform is powered by the Vera engine, which is built on and just absolutely supercharges ApacheFlink. It allows you to connect, process, analyze, and govern your data in one ultra high performance streaming data solution. Vera is always available. It's fault tolerant and it's tailored for the seamless support of data ingestion, going from source to sink for structured, unstructured, semi-structured data in any format, it doesn't matter. It also conducts stream processing in real time and on a data lake. We're more than just a stream processing engine. It means you can access your data from anywhere at any time. And it's cloud native, which lowers your state storage and operational costs and allows for really fast scaling and rescaling. And it's secure by default, as you have access to your data, but we don't. We simply carry the control plane that defines the actual configurations, which automatically checks the zero trust box. In addition, you can interrogate your data in flight, so while it's happening, and be able to run queries in all the apps for analytics as well. So you can access reference data, including historical enrichment from your lake houses and external systems, and then you can enrich and act before you store that data, essentially bringing your lake house into real time. We call it a stream house. And Vera provides performance that's up to 2x faster than any other open source Flink or open source Flink alternative available. It can process billions of events per second. It reduces data processing delays down to the millisecond level. Vera's performance allows quick deployment of streaming apps in a scalable and cost-efficient way. So if you want a highly performant, modern streaming data platform, Ververica provides this. If you want a balance of security, flexibility, and efficiency in your deployment, Bring Your Own Cloud solves this. And since we're just about at time, and I want to end where we started, let's take a look at the challenges that FCX is addressing. Challenge number one, their cloud migration project. There's no issue here. Ververica's Bring Your Own Cloud makes it easy to choose the cloud vendor and region that they want. In fact, FCX has the flexibility to choose between many different configurations. They could also have Link jobs move between on-premises and cloud. In addition, they're going to get a single pane of glass view into their data that they can't get with their on-premises solutions today. They're able to implement a multi-cloud approach, which means they've got resilience built inside their system and better failover capabilities. They also get to take advantage of pre-existing cloud contracts, discounts, and relieve some CapEx, OpEx pressure for their finance team. They've got guaranteed uptime and SLAs. And with Ververica's unified streaming data platform, they were immediately able to build, deploy, and scale their real-time streaming apps without the complexity of first having to create and manage the entire underlying infrastructure, because they have access to production-ready Flink clusters available on demand. So now they're focusing on business results instead of having to maintain their infrastructure. Their team is spending their time on application logic. They're doing real-time data transformation. They're doing analytics, all while reducing their operational overhead. Which brings us to the second challenge that they're trying to solve. Their fraud detection project. Now that they've been armed with a highly scalable performance solution, they got right to work on the fraud detection project, building a pipeline powered by Ververica's unified streaming data platform, where they're continuously streaming data and autonomously reacting to potential fraudulent activity for their consumers. They can also build this out into multiple other use cases or an internal activity as well. The sky is really the limit when it comes to real-time use cases that these guys can explore. And quite importantly, for both cost and security, Ververica's solution puts Flink in direct proximity to the data because it's living in FCX's cloud. And because it's running very close to the source and the sink, where it's coming from and where it's going, their latency is incredibly low, and use cases like fraud detection that require Lightning fast data can access the data that's needed to make these millisecond decisions. This is keeping their business running smoothly. This is also keeping their customers happier. And finally, the third challenge. If leadership is hoping for a trust-less future, I have a feeling they're really going to love a zero trust future. So thank you for taking this journey with FCX, again, a made-up company based on real company, and Ververica today. I'd love to share a few more resources that you might find helpful. If you're curious to learn more about Ververica's BYOC deployment, you can scan here and drop into our blog series all about our unified streaming data platform in the BYOC deployment. If you're ready to solve real-time use cases, you should check out our website for info on the Vera engine and get to learn a little bit more about that as well. You can also reach out and contact us from here. And each year, Ververica is really excited to be the hosts and sponsors of Flink Forward. And Flink Forward is the event that brings together all of the data streaming community. This year, October 13th through 16th, we're actually going to be in Barcelona, Spain. We're really excited about that. So our call for papers is open. Our early bird tickets are open. If you're watching this recording after a certain date, our regular ones will be. But do come and join us there. It's a great spot to learn more. And if you've got a paper you'd like to submit, please don't hesitate to. We'd love to have you on stage with us. And if you'd like to connect, you can find me on LinkedIn. With that said, thank you so much for joining me for this session. Looking forward to seeing and hearing from more of you of your experience. And if you've got questions about how FCX handles this or how Ververica helps with anything, real-time streaming data, bring your own cloud deployments, zero trust, we're here to help.